It's to you, sir.
Hello. It is me. Absolutely. It is. I'm having a great day. I hope you are.
It's gorgeous outside,
It is.
and
Yeah, that's part of the reason I'm having a good day. Not
yeah,
the only reason, but it's a good reason.
I
Yeah.
spent Saturday, which was just a deluge, right? And I had a tournament that day, and so I was in the rain for like 6 hours, and just
Mm.
everything I wore or around me, you could literally wring it out. And
Oregon. Yeah.
yeah, and that was a yes, that was a long day. So then to have this week, it's like it's just drawing me outside. I just like want to be out there taking in all the vitamin D.
By the way, do I sound okay?
Well, you're pretty echoey.
That's what it is. Just a moment. Just a moment. I can fix that. So go ahead and keep talking.
Oh, well, sure. Well, I didn't really have much else to say other than, well, here, I mean, the weather, it's gorgeous. It makes me want to be outside. I also find this, and this may or may not be of interest to you, that when people ask me how I'm doing, generally, are you still there? You look like you
There we go.
froze.
How's that? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that sounds worse. Keep talking.
Hello? Hello? Tell you what, give me 1 second.
All
I'll
right.
be right back and I'll have it fixed.
All right. I will just keep myself occupied here. Just It is January 9th. It's our first podcast of the year. We're going to be starting a book series soon. I don't actually have the book right in front of me. Actually, it's right here. I'll get that in a minute. But we're going to be going through a book, much as we did about political gospel. We'll be looking at another book, going chapter by chapter. So this will be kind of an in-between week until we get that kind of sorted out. And this week,
How's that?
go ahead.
Is that any better?
No, nope. It's kind of like
I'm going to leave and
mechanical.
come back on.
Okay, all right. I'll keep talking. Oops. Okay, let's try that. Oh, that's my head. Let's fix it. Whoever's watching this, I just want to apologize to you for what is probably very confusing. All right, so you're going to see me make some adjustments here to the camera. Me with the largest head in the history of mankind. There we go. Anyway, we'll be talking more about the sermon from this past weekend. At the close of the sermon, Brian and I found ourselves discussing that more, and the kind of the remarkable complexity around that, and how it really warranted some extra attention and extra conversation around it. Because really, part of the reason the podcast exists is it's super some of the topics that we address are so rich and complex that you really have to explore them more. Oh, looks like Brian's here, so let's let him in.
How's that?
That's better. There we go.
That was weird. All right. All right. No, we're good. All right. Sorry about that, folks.
Well, they got to see me futz around with the views and set it up. I've got a pre-made view that's just me, and I had one that's just you. But in the event that like you're going to speak for like 5 minutes, I could like flip to you, but that got to be too much work, so I quit.
All right. So, yes, sunny, gorgeous days. Yeah.
Well, I've introduced the topic. I wanted to say one thing before we jump in.
Okay.
And that I struggle when people ask me how I'm doing, right?
I
And
do.
and my tendency is to just go to the weather. Like, how are you doing? It's really a beautiful day. And because I don't know, I know that they don't really want me to go off for 5 minutes talking about what's happening in my life. And so,
I wonder if there's way I could ask that. Because
Oh.
I'm guilty of that. I do that to you all the time.
Well, I feel like I can tell you, right? We have a relationship where I don't mind. I mean, there's sometimes I'm like, I don't like, I'm in a kind of a headspace where I don't want to talk about it or whatever, or I just like, or honestly, I'm like, I don't actually know how I'm doing.
There's that. Yeah.
Like, taking time to pause and little self inventory. How am I doing? How am I feeling about life? What's going on?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's kind of scary. Like, it's sometimes easier to kind of put the blinders on and just keep moving. Because if you ever stop to really explore where you're at, you might find yourself.
Not wanting to think that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think for people like me who do that all the time, who ask that question all the time, it would be good to work on a different question, or as one guy I watch, give a cold read of, so you look tired today. Are you just been a little stressed out lately? And which you could say, no, I'm feeling great. Or, hey, I bet you're enjoying the sun. All right, what's something about the sun that you've enjoyed? Come up with a different question.
Yeah.
Than blanket, how are you?
Yeah. And I think we're all guilty of that. Where I find it's useful is where, if I know that person, I can ask a question of some specificity, like, hey, what's it like having what was it like having the boys back home for the holidays? And how did that kind of lend itself to how you spent the holidays?
Yeah. Or if you know something, they were doing something that day. How did that go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
specific.
All right.
Throw the question down. So with that said,
I introduced the topic as we're going to explore. I mean, basically, that we're going to explore the sermon. So now, I want to give you the opportunity to give us kind of the elevator pitch of that, and so we can explore more as you and I were at the conclusion of the service.
Once in a while, I look back on a sermon and I realize I bit off more than I could chew.
Mm.
And this is one of them. There's so much here that there's no way I could have. There's no way I should have thought that I could have gotten this all done in a single sermon. There's too much there. We mostly focused on verse 1 of 2 Peter, and it goes, Simon Peter, the slave and apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who have obtained an equal faith with ours through the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And there is so much in that. And I generally talked about how this verse hints at, addresses identity, it addresses hierarchy, it addresses privilege, it addresses really just how just the human drive to fix injustice. I mean, all of this is here in kernel form. And I probably should have said, okay, let's just back up and say deal with one of those 3 or 4 different things. So I'm not sure how much how long I could probably go. I could redo for now and that, but that's not going to be helpful.
There was one thing I was hoping to explore a little bit, because I don't know. Because to me, it's what pops when I hear that as much as anything is that Christ isn't just for people who are Jewish. In that time, what I hear Peter saying is like, it's not just those people who were waiting; it's for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I think that is. I think it's a bit lost. I think you. I think in your introduction to the sermon, you talked about who we are as modern day Christians and how we kind of represent. I might be mixing up a couple of weeks, but how we represent kind of who the Pharisees were, and that there are these kind of people outside that we perceive as being outside or not, having been invited, or they weren't part of the club, so they don't get the prize.
Yes.
And that what I hear Peter saying is like, yeah, it's not just this group, it's all of y'all. To me, that's super powerful, because I think today culturally I feel like we do a lot of work to keep people out, or at least maybe not even intentionally, but our actions seem to suggest like you don't really qualify. And
And you're talking about as Christians or just people in general?
people in general.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's this whole discussion of who, and again, to use the current language, who has the privilege of being the insiders and who doesn't, who has the prestige and who doesn't, is all over the place. And to say it another way, who are the marginalized and who are not? I mean, this is a gigantic question and topic for today. And this addresses that in that phrase of, to those who have obtained a faith of equal standing with ours. And in the Greek, and commentaries make it, there's a little bit of a debate. Is he talking about Jewish versus Gentile, which is possible, and it certainly is at least there. But it could also be apostle and non-apostle, which is even more radical, because the apostles not only are Jewish, but they also are, they're the apostles, right? And so who of all the people in the Christian community that would have the greatest prestige would be a Jewish apostle. And he's saying, no, you are all equal with me. And that is such a radical, deeply, shockingly countercultural viewpoint. And it doesn't say, and this is the piece, sorry, I'm just going to rant. You can stop me, you can interrupt me anytime. But that doesn't mean that hierarchies and power and privilege does not exist in our society. Of course it does. What it's saying is this is an alternative way of organizing the world. This is how God sees things, not how humans see things. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, there are people who have more power and privilege in our society, and that's not okay. This cuts both ways. On one hand, gives you a vision of radical equality, and at the same time, it condemns all the human people thinking that they're better than other people because of education or money or fame or list whatever. Whatever it is. It both does both things at the same time.
It that calls a few things to mind for me. One of them just completely escaped my brain. It makes me very sad because it was the one that I was most interested in talking about. I should have done this. This is what Brian does when he's trying not to forget something.
Help, Joe. I'm telling you, it does. Weird.
Well, shoot. Well, let me just talk about kind of in our in a modern context. If you look at like the history of people from other countries immigrating to the United States, it is our history, right? But we also have this tendency to say, well, my family's been here for 150 years. But when we first got here from Ireland, we were pretty much treated like trash. But, and same with the Italians. It was the same thing, where we kind of marginalize people. Or say, like, in this case, it's like, well, I've been in the club this long. And so you haven't been here long enough to really be at my stature. And now let me come back around to that ties into this, which I just remembered, is that we as a society, I think, Western society, have this thought of whatever, I deserve this because I earned it somehow. So, and I know I see the look in your eyes. You're like, where are you going with this, Joe? But when I look at like how we in the church treat new people coming into the church, new Christians, or even people outside the church, it's like, well, I've been here this long. I've lived my life this long. I've been a Christian this long. These are all the things that I've done, and therefore I am operating on another level than you.
Oh, and this rips that apart.
Exactly. And when you live in a way where you're like, I have earned this, like I have put in the time,
Right.
I deserve this recognition, this stature.
Right, because it says that they have an equal standing, they've obtained an equal standing. That phrase obtained it literally translates gotten by lot,
Right.
by lottery, right? It's like this is a divinely just handed to you thing. It utterly guts that they've done anything to achieve this lofty privilege, and it comes through not their righteousness, but through Jesus's righteousness. And so that's a part of that's in this. Is all of this is just you get everybody is equal, and at the same time, that high status has nothing to do with our identity, in the sense of what we've done, who we are, our skin color, our social standing, our righteousness. None of that. It's a complete divine. It's all by divine action, not human action.
Yeah.
It amazes me that people struggle with this, but this is foundational to what the gospel says. All of this is, but yeah.
But I think that's a lot of where the struggle is, though, is like, well, my whole life I've been taught that I need to work to get anything. And the harder that I work, the more that I get. And
Biblical.
well, no, I know. And yet, if you consider that, the larger part of our population professes a Christian faith, we've got a lot of people who are trying to earn, and it's hard to shut that part of your brain off when it comes to your faith. Like you were so used to that. It's like, well, if I volunteer more, I'm more valuable somehow.
Listen to me more, and I'll have more value in the church. And it's like, no.
Right. Well, and then the flip side of that, I think, which is helpful, is that there isn't a hierarchy of sin necessarily. Like if you are longing to have a relationship with Christ, it's not like you have to do more work based on how much you think you have sinned, right? Okay, well, if you've sinned this much, you have to do that much more than everybody else.
Yeah, completely not the case at all. Yeah, because again, your status is on His righteousness, not yours.
Right.
Completely right. But on the other hand, there is this flip side of, but what is great in God's economy is service, because he joins this high status label apostle with slave. And Jesus in Mark 10 talks about how if you want to be the greatest, you need to be the servant of all. So it's like there's an exaltation in a glory in actually being the one who the world sees as being the least, the servant, the lowest. It's like Escher's world. Everything, all those price tags are flipped.
And is there a race to the bottom when you have that?
Yeah.
Well, I also think about like modern day martyrdom. Like, how do I set myself up to be perceived as the lowest so that I can win?
Yeah, but see, then you hear your words.
Right.
Perceived. It's all about that's still a pride thing. No. It's taking on the form of the servant like Jesus, where you don't even need, because it doesn't change your status, right? No matter how humble you get, no matter how much of a service you get, you still have an equal faith with with the apostles. So the issue is true service is self-forgetfulness. It's not about me at all. I'm just here to serve and give of myself to another person.
And to me, that's a natural outpouring of love. That if you start with learning to love somebody, which is learning about who they are, and once you have a perspective of them as an individual, it's very difficult not to love somebody. And then pouring into them is a gift to you to a certain degree, but it doesn't elevate you or anything. Frankly, when I first started leading worship at the church, I didn't really know people. So it took a period of time to talk to people and to get closer to them. And for me as effectively an introvert, it takes me a bit to get there. And then you just wake up one day and you're like, wow, okay, I love these people. You can't force yourself to love them. You have to, there's work involved in being present and being available, being vulnerable.
Yeah. So this viewpoint, and we're still not even plumbing all the depths, but among them it cuts in multiple directions at once. On one hand, it says there's no hierarchies in God's economy, and yet it also at the same time condemns human elevating and bringing low people. That whole framework. It also with like identity and things like that. I mean, it doesn't on one hand say that it doesn't erase my distinctiveness at all. Peter is still Peter, the only one who Jesus got that gave that name. He's still Simon, his race, but he is also, a servant and an apostle. I mean, but it all puts it integrated into a single identity of being Jesus in relation to Jesus. And so it doesn't ignore the distinctions of people. It just reintegrates it into a single identity.
And I think this is something you and I were kind of struggling to describe to each other on Sunday, is to say that your identity is made up of many things. None of those is going to trump your relationship with Christ and how that informs the way that you live. It is integrated within that.
Yeah, and that's why I struggled with the framework of talking about identity in terms of hierarchy, because I do like how it puts one at the top. What it doesn't do is it suggests that they're not interconnected at all. They can be completely different, separate layers of a cake. You see what I'm saying? Versus, it's like, okay, like my identity, if you think of it as a pie, like, okay, the whole thing is a pie. And if you just say, well, being a believer is maybe the largest piece of a pie, but that big piece doesn't have anything to do with another little piece. It's just they're all different pieces. Like, no. There's no cohesiveness to a person's identity. And that's why I struggled with the identity. And I'm not even sure if I like that analogy.
Well, let's stick with the pie for a moment. Okay. So if we have a pie, there is, and if you have apple, cherry, strawberry, rhubarb, peach, banana, whatever. Okay. If those were identities, right? There would be no way to create a single pie that could very cleanly separate those different flavors. They're all going to bleed into each other somehow. There's not like a purity, the apple is adjacent to strawberry, rhubarb, and banana, which is probably not good. But one influences how you experience the other. So it's not like I am a father that does not relate to any of my other identities. Well, of course it does.
Of course,
Yeah.
right. And that and that's why I'm going to suggest that the entire thing is that you belong to Jesus, because that one is the single one that should affect all the others. It's the overall one, I think. And even in Peter's, like, I can see how that one single relationship affected all his different ways he identified himself. That's
Yeah.
what I'm
There's
you
so
know
many. We're searching for that perfect analogy, and when
there is one. And yeah. And it's not like we're trying to minimize people's lived experiences either, and I did briefly bring this up, and it's worth saying again. I'm not saying that some of the viewpoints that are circulating in our society today, of like CRT and intersectionality, have nothing useful to say. Absolutely, they do. They point out different ways that systems are inherently unjust. It points out the way people have been mistreated in ways we have not been recognizing it. There's so much there that does need to be seen. So I don't want people to think that we're dismissing that.
mm-hmm.
I just think there's more. That is as the only tool to look at things is not adequate.
Yeah, it's well, I think I use the term prism, like your a whatever slice of pie we're talking about shouldn't be the primary prism through which we view the world. Like when we talk about identity, I mean, we all have multiple identities in terms of like what we who we identify ourselves as. Like for me, growing up in an Irish Catholic household is part of my identity. It does influence the way that I view the world, but it's not the primary prism through which I view the world. It influences, but it's not the main thing. And I'm trying to think of something else that kind of applies to that, but is it like my political perspectives influence how I view the world, but it should not be the dominant prism through which I view the world.
Right. Which is where the hierarchy metaphor is actually helpful.
Yeah.
Which one's going to be the primary way of looking at things. And so, yeah.
I've got something.
Yes, go ahead. If I have one last thing, we can go, but I want yours first.
When you go to the eye doctor, right, and you sit there, they put a series of lenses and they stack them together,
right,
to understand how you're going to see, right? So if you think about, there's an order in which the eye doctor is going to put those in,
okay,
right? So if we put Christ first, that is going, whatever we choose to put first in terms of those lenses is going to be the thing that most influences everything that comes after that.
That's not bad.
All right, we're working on it, but go ahead.
That's not. I just wanted to talk about one last thing, because after our conversation, I spent some time thinking about it too, and it's this whole that it doesn't dismiss people who've been mistreated by saying that mistreatment doesn't matter. This being righteous or having status and privilege based on the actions of Jesus, cuts again both ways. On one hand, it says that you can be someone who has not lived a very good life, and you can have equal status with Peter. So on one hand, it elevates people who our society says are worthless, So, but at the same, and people who are victims and who have been mistreated and treated unjustly, is like, you are equal with us. On the other hand, it also does the other thing. It does the other direction, but by not only did it condemn those people who mistreated people, who racist example, saying that that's not okay. But but it also says, but we all have something that's not okay as well. It doesn't allow for us to stand up and think I'm better than you.
Yeah. Well, there's
Right.
an analogy that I use called, the bucket of stuff. Like we've all got our bucket of stuff. You might look at somebody and go, look at all the stuff that they're contending with, or the things, their difficulties, or the life they have chosen for themselves. And we're like, well, I don't have to worry about that. Well, no, you got your bucket of stuff too. It just may not be as obvious to everybody else.
Right. And so there's people who feel like the world has mistreated them, and it's right. Yeah, they have mistreated you, and they have treated you like crud. That's not okay. And at the same time, you're not perfect either.
Right. Right.
Right. And so it's kind of, it levels all human trying to stand above everybody else and just say, no, it's either it's in Jesus and that's it. And I think that if I could end, do you have more on that? Because otherwise I just want to end on one thought. Do you have more?
Nope. Go for it.
And I don't know how much we've described this well or not, but one of the things I tried to say at the beginning of the message is how helpful this is, how much this is good news, because it really presents a possibility of true unity. Our society is so broken and fractured, where everybody's trying to be better than everybody else, and everybody's like, they're bad and I'm not, or we're not. All of these different factions, and this unifies it. That is an incredibly hopeful message. It's hopeful because on one hand, it doesn't disregard people's pain and suffering. At the same time, it doesn't allow one person or group to think they're better than everybody else. There's a hope because it doesn't ride on our human ability to fix the world. Not that we shouldn't act righteously and justly, but we know that we can only be a foretaste of what will one day happen. And so it's so hopeful. There's so much grace to this, which our society so desperately needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Complex stuff.
It is. And I still don't think
We'll keep trying.
I'll keep trying. Yeah. Well, next week we're moving on. I thought about going back over this verse. I'm like, no, I'm just going to move forward.
All right. I told folks that next week we're going to start talking about the book.
Oh, okay, good.
And I don't remember what the book is. I can't reach it from where I'm at, and you were gone off screen. Say again.
Happy. That's what it's called.
By whom?
Randy Alcorn.
There we go.
Now he has a 400-page book. This is the simplified booklet form, so it's only like 80 pages. So, but it distills down the core points of his book. So much more accessible.
All right, good.
If you want more info, read the big book. If not, if you want just the gist, get the booklet.
Sounds good.
So, okay.
Send us off, sir.
All right, you guys take care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys Sunday.
Cheers.